After spending the better part of the last several months focusing on the SUV space, Volkswagen India is now turning its attention into sedan territory. The Virtus is a car that we have been talking about for some time. It also builds on the MQB A0iN platform strategy, made in India, for India, and of course also for other markets from here. So plenty to discuss with Ashish Gupta about the car and more. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Sedan.
Firstly, congrats.
Thank you.
Yet another very strong looking product coming from your side.
Yeah.
And also the sort of, I won't call it the culmination of this strategy because there's a lot more yet to unfold. But everything that you have talked about or announced now is sort of becoming reality. The car itself, very important for you.
Definitely. As you said, it kind of rounds up round one of the India 2.0 strategy. So from that perspective, I think it's coming together of last 3 or 4 years of efforts, what we have been building up in terms of our positioning, in terms of our communications. I think it culminates with the launch of the Virtus, and from there you have to actually now take this portfolio from strength to strength. I think from that angle, it is a labor of love which is coming to fruition now.
When you were bringing the Taigun to market, at the time, a lot of it was based on the planning, of course, and the research. But you still had to see how it would play out. Some of those learnings would have helped you with the Virtus.
No, definitely. When you launch a new car, there are 2 or 3 aspects which you definitely need to fine tune as you go into the launch or when the car starts hitting the market. The first is the color mix. Now, again, I'll talk about the good things that happened with the Taigun. We got the color mix right. The demand and the bookings are exactly in the way we had planned the color mix to be. The other aspect that sometimes needs a fine tuning is the variant mix, the entry levels, the mid lines and the top lines. So there we have some learnings from the Taigun. We definitely see a major uptake on the 1.5, especially on the GT Plus. So that's something which we are fine tuning, trying to get the supply chain in line with the market demand. So, but that also gives us a learning for the Virtus, which we'll implement.
In fact, it's funny you went to the 1.5 because, given that pressure that we have talked about, of course, in the past, Klaus Zelmer spoke about it as well, that, that demand has been surprising in a good way. With the sedan, does that put added pressure? Because, there are only so many of those engines you could get. Of course, we know that the production is also shared with the sister brand. So how does that set yourself up? Because it's not just about allocation or, being able to have the supply, but also about what the customer wants and how, you approach that with them.
No, definitely it's a fine balance. As you said, there is a certain kind of production allocation you take into your planning. Typically for any production mix changes, there's a 12 to 13 weeks lead time. So your flexibility to react to a change in market demand sometimes gets limited, or the effects of your change of planning takes 3 months to realize. So that's definitely a challenge, but that's one of the advantages of being a big company, that if the need is felt and if we are able to see merit in making those changes, the entire company is in a position to support us, and that's what will happen.
Okay, so what is the game plan then with the Virtus? Where do you see the demand really coming from, both in terms of the variants that you're planning and also the markets, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3?
See, if you look at the sedan segment itself, the premium mid-size sedan segment where we are bringing the Virtus to, I would say the demand is more or less centered around tier 1 and tier 2 cities, the super metros and the metros and the state capitals. Yeah. So that's where we are the strongest. We have most of our network, I would say almost 70 to 80% of our network centered around these demand clusters. We have moved the brand into a premium positioning as well while remaining accessible. So we actually are bringing a product which suits our positioning and our presence in the market as well. So definitely we are hitting the demand centers for this segment. And if you look at the market development as well, I would say the current increase in demand in the market is also being fueled by additional purchases in families, especially because of the corona wave. We see people going for additional cars in their family because of the need for personal mobility. And that's where I see a lot of potential for different body styles in the same family. If you are a family of 4 or 5 people and you need 2 cars in the family, you would typically have 2 body styles. Yeah? So thankfully, we are now present with 2 body styles in a premium segment or in a premium positioning with the Taigun and the Virtus. And I see that as a great opportunity for us.
But do you think that in this segment, the price sensitivity is a little bit harsher than it is with SUVs, where people tend to, be a little bit more open with their purse strings?
In some way, you are right, but that is where your variant mix or your, variant strategy plays into. So we have the 1 liter and the 1.5 liter both being available on the Virtus. On the 1 liter, we want to definitely address the more value conscious customers in the segment. But with the 1.5, the fans, the performance oriented, and people who like to play in the upper segments.
But also vis-a-vis the Taygun, in terms of both pricing and positioning. Of course, the two body styles are very different, and therefore that in itself will attract a different kind of buyer. But we know that cross-shopping happens. How careful do you need to be to make sure that they get that mix right?
So if you look at it, the volumes that we have planned and the ratio between the Taygun and the Virtus we have planned, I think both play into each other. The kind of customers who walk into Volkswagen showrooms actually are both comfortable buying an SUV or a sedan. So from that perspective, I think having these two cars in the showroom is an actual advantage for us because it feeds into each other.
But will the Taygun take the lead on volume? Is that
yes,
a correct
definitely.
assumption?
Definitely. Just by pure numbers itself, the A0 SUV or the mid-size SUV segment is almost 20%, 22% of the market right now. And the mid-size premium sedan segment is around 8%. So definitely from a size of the segment itself, the Taygun definitely takes the volumes.
Now, you talked about, what accounts for a large chunk of the market. The other thing that accounts for a large chunk is the subcompact SUV. We sort of flirted with that conversation again with Mr. Zelma. Your thoughts on the need to even look at that space for a brand like Volkswagen, given its premium positioning, and B, the expectation or reality of it?
See, if you ask me personally, and from growth of the brand, there are two ways for this brand to grow. One is to make the leap and to bridge the gap to electrification. That is where the brand is moving globally, and we are one of the strongest players in that. So I personally believe that is the route that I would choose for the brand in India as well. When you want to grow from, let's say, a 1% market share to above 3% market share, you have to be careful in the choices you make. You cannot be spreading yourself too thin. You have to focus and put all resources into something which you believe in. And the brand has definitely globally believed and invested towards the transformation into electric. That's the route that I would also like to prefer in India for the brand.
But is that then also fair to say, Ashish, that where we start to see a little bifurcation between where Skoda goes, because we know that there is a subcompact product coming from them, while you're saying that you would like to look at moving upwards, towards electrification and satisfying that slightly more premium customer who might expect that from you.
So if you look at the positioning between the brands globally, also Siddharth, and you know this very well, we are positioned, or Volkswagen is positioned as a top of volume brand. So we would like to continue that positioning in India as well. Customers expect that from us. I have learned that from the Taygun launch as well. Customers have definitely come back to us and say that we expect premium in every sense from Volkswagen, and that definitely tells me that is the direction for us to take.
All right, so that's interesting, because then, like I said, there could be a greater dissimilarity between the two, where today I think everybody wants to keep drawing parallels. Speaking of which, for the Virtus, again, how do you distinguish it from the Skoda product?
See,
besides styling, of course.
Yeah, in terms of the car, I think 2 or 3 elements which will define how the Virtus does compared to our sister brand, along with the design, which is going to be dramatically different. The second is the true global nature of this car. We are a global brand, and this product is available and will be available in more than 25 markets globally. So I think the customers who buy into the Volkswagen brand are looking for that global appeal of a brand. That's something which the Volkswagen Virtus definitely brings it, just by the sheer fact that it is a global product. We have called it the new global sedan. So that's something which feeds into the global aspirations of Indian customers. Then in terms of differentiation, if you look at it, we will have differentiating factors both on the exterior and the interior. It will come with the famed GT badging and the GT elements, which make it very, very differentiated from anything else in the market. I won't only talk about our sister brand, but also differentiated from anything in the market.
Now, 25 markets, almost as many as the Taygun, from India. So that was, I know, always part of the plan. It's nice to see that sort of coming to fruition. How much of that has to be accelerated given the fact that now, the Taigun's already, in some of those markets, it's been accepted. People have already acknowledged, as you know, and I'll say it, I know you can't, that it's a better quality product than the one that it replaces in some of those markets because it comes from India. That said, is there a greater impetus to speed up exports on the Virtus?
I think, as you said, it's definitely been part of the plan. The entire business case for India 2.0 always includes exports. So these markets that are planned are actually a part of the master plan itself, and we have to see how the adoption in this market goes and whether the potential can be also explored in other markets. Potential also gets limited because you can export only to right-hand drive markets. Although the markets that we are exporting to also includes left-hand drive cars, like the biggest one is Mexico, as you know, or maybe South Africa going forward. So definitely we start with around 25 markets and then see where the potential is.
But that should happen this year?
Yes, the exports should start, yes.
All right, so you're going to have your hands full on that front in any case, and so will your production colleagues in Pune. But tell me this, that, by the time, let's say either at the end of this year or maybe this time next year, not just in terms of market share or volumes that you would have sold, where do you see the brand being in the minds of the consumer?
I think what is most important for me is for Volkswagen to be seen as as a brand which actually leads the way in terms of being an innovative and a transformative brand. Placing ourselves at the premium end of the market, but yet being accessible. Yeah? When I say accessible, it means in terms of product portfolio, being in the segments which are growing, which customers are aspiring for, being accessible in terms of price points, being accessible in terms of the language we speak, being accessible in the terms of the services we provide. So this is something which is very dear to our entire team in Volkswagen, to position ourselves as a premium accessible brand, because that's the only way we can make a business case for ourselves and customers.
But some of what you've just described, and also tying into your previous answer, aren't you building yourself a case then to start looking at least niche model or limited units model which could be electric?
Yes, why not? And that's what I said.
And more in the short term. I mean, I don't mean 5 years.
Definitely. The long-term strategy in the second half of the decade, as Mr. Zellmer also said, has to be into mass electrification in India. But we have to lay the groundwork before that. And that would call for having test fleets, bringing limited volumes of electric cars from our global portfolio. And that thankfully is available for us. Yeah? It's a question of when and how do we get them. But definitely, if we have to move towards this transformation in the second half of the decade, we have to start laying the groundwork from this year onwards.
So last thing then, as you get that part of your strategy in place, assuming that you don't go with Skoda on the sub 4 meter product, does there still need to be one other Volkswagen product on MQB A0iN?
Not necessarily. As I said, resources will always be limited. So we as a brand, together with our global direction, will have to take a call. Whether we bring in another product on the MQB or make the leap directly to electrification. So that's something which is an interesting conversation for me at the headquarters as well, and for my board colleagues in Wolfsburg as well, on what kind of a leap do we take for the Volkswagen brand. And I think we'll make the right decision.
It's an interesting conversation for me also, as you know. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that gets us really excited and interested, because you're right, we're also sitting at a point where there are such big changes happening globally that there's no very obvious way forward. There are many layers to it. So great, all the very best with the Virtus.
Thank you, Siddharth.
And the rollout as well as the ramp up. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Siddharth.